welcome to the Minutes to Win It podcast. I'm Jason Gilbo at JGilbo11. With me is Russell Clay at Russell J. Clay, breaking down tonight's Tuesday six-game NBA slate and looking like a good one as far as Vegas concerns go. Everything over 200, a couple games over 210 with Brooklyn, Philly, Denver, Orlando, and Los Angeles, Sacramento. No real blowout concerns outside of maybe the Spurs being home favorites of 9.5 points there. But outside of that, it shouldn't be anything like last night where we had basically 6-7 blowouts turn a 12-game slate into basically 4.
Yeah, that was a rough one. This slate is pretty intriguing in terms of being versatile. I think there's a lot of different ways to go. I do think people are gonna there might be some chalk, but I think there's a lot of ways to differentiate yourself tonight.
Yeah, I think most of the chalk probably lies in that Lakers-Kings game as well as Orlando. But, look at some of the other options there. Boston, Indiana, 207, both projected to score over 100. Nice up-tempo game there. Even Milwaukee and Toronto, you always like Milwaukee because their starters play 35-plus minutes, so that's nice. I think Denver and Spurs are going to be and the Clippers are kind of going to be the pivot points, I guess you could say.
Right. I think Toronto Bucks and Spurs Clippers are sort of the ones that might be a little lower owned in general. But I think there's some interesting contrarian plays in those games that could sort of set you apart.
Yeah, same with Boston, Indiana. I just think there's a lot of uncertainty with the Jay Crowder news, although a lot of it's projected to go to Marcus Smart, Evan Turner, but we could see a tick of usage up for other guys as well. So I think something to keep an eye on. But basically every game's in play tonight for me. Each team I'll be looking at least in all formats.
Yeah, and especially tournaments. It's an interesting night, and the slate isn't too big where you can really sort of switch things up.
Yeah, 6-7 game slates are really my favorite. That's personally, I just think it's the perfect size. Not quite 4, but it's not a monster 10 or 12 game slate. So it's just
right. Those 10 and 12 game slates, it just seems like there's either a little too much value or just everything's a little overwhelming. 6 or 7, it's kind of like, all right, I got my value here. There's some contrarian plays here, and we got some nice big boys up top here.
Which is the case tonight. Moving over to point guard, taking a look at some guys, look at some injury concerns, and Alfred Payton already been ruled out. It's nice Orlando doesn't keep us waiting. But C.J. Watson is questionable for tonight's game due to illness. Brandon Jennings questionable for tonight's game. So there's a situation where maybe Watson and Jennings both play. There's a situation where neither of them play. There's a situation of one of the two play. But that's one to keep an eye on. And let's say if nobody plays out of those two guys, you're going to see Oladipo probably run the point guard spot, and Fournier and Hezonja run both the 2 and the 3.
Right, and if Jennings plays, I'm pretty uncomfortable with it. I'm okay with sort of throwing him in maybe one lineup or something just to be different, but not someone I would be investing in just because the starter's out and he's going to come in. That's something I'm a little uncomfortable with.
Yeah, it's a way to be contrarian because if Jennings plays, I think Watson's the safer option if he plays, but if Jennings does, still, the guy's so up and down, even if he gets decent minutes, it's still iffy, and still always minutes in the Scott Skiles system is not guaranteed. You could have all 5 point guards out on your team, and you would find a way to just, not play 3 of them. So,
right.
That's an iffy situation, but Oladipo and Fournier, great values already tonight, great plays, and they would just become even more so if all those guys sit as well.
Right. I think just putting a little more emphasis on those two is kind of how you want to evaluate that.
Yeah. Looking up top, so there are a couple stars. Chris Paul, Kyle Lowry coming off a monster game, 33, 11, and 7. In a tougher matchup. Both are in tougher matchups, but as we've seen, Chris Paul has torched San Antonio this season, 27, 3, and 11 over 2 games. I can't quite pay up the price tag just because I'm paying up for Boogie tonight and rather pay up for some other options, but Chris Paul is a way to pivot.
He's definitely a way to pivot, and some of these values we're going to get to a little bit down the road might open up some avenues for him. Mostly, I'm probably not going to be on him tonight just because I like a lot of these guys at point guard tonight, and I think they're a little better value wise. But yeah, he's in play. Probably stick to tournaments though.
Yeah. Looking at Kyle Lowry, Milwaukee, yes, have been tough against point guards this season. No MCW, no lengthy body of his getting in the way on defense. It's Jared Bayless playing the point guard spot there. Lowry, just 8,100 seems so underpriced for how he's been producing this season, and especially of late. I mean, up over 40 fantasy points per game over the last 6. Shows monster upside. Just 300 more than Rondo. I mean, it's kind of a pivot that you could really make, and it's definitely justified.
Yeah, going back to the well again. I'm not against it. Again, I do like some of the other values at point guard, but he's definitely in play, and I think his upside he brings is pretty much. I mean, he's right there with Chris Paul for me for upside tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I love Lowry. I mean, Lowry's one of my favorite players just because he always seems to go so underowned.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, the perceived matchup looks tough, but with his usage, with the total there, I mean, the usage all comes from him and DeRozan on this team, so you always like that.
Right.
And it's the same reason why you like Paul, because Paul, the usage is going to be there. But yeah, I mean, obviously it's tough to get away from Rondo against the Lakers.
Right. And that's where this is where we start to look at sort of, especially on DraftKings, you look at Rondo, only 7,800, and the Lakers. I mean, it just seems to pay off pretty much every night. So, I mean, that's a plus matchup, and those are the types of thing you look for. But he is going to be chalky tonight, so that's what you got to be aware of.
Yeah, he's going to be chalky, and while we haven't quite seen the monster upside of late, I mean, yes, he does have that upside against the Lakers team. That's pretty bad. Not pretty bad. They're very bad. But, I mean, I just don't think he has quite Lowry upside. And I think that's something that you could really make a push for. Maybe Lowry outscores him by 10 and 15, and that could be such a big difference for just 300 more.
Definitely.
But coming down in some options, this is one I'm really intrigued by, and that's Isaiah Thomas. And not just because I'm a Celtics fan, but 7,100 on DK there, a little pricier on FanDuel where he's 79. But it's not a great spot for him, but it's not a bad one either.
Right, yeah, I think he's going to fall into sort of the range of outcomes he usually does, 35 to 40 fantasy points. But that's hitting value at his price. I mean, it just seems to keep going down. So you're happy if you get 35 to 40, and if somehow the guy you'd be pivoting off of, which is D'Angelo Russell, if somehow he sort of busts tonight like he did the other day, that could be a huge, huge boost for you.
Yeah, I think Russell's going to be the popular play out of those two. And Thomas, yeah, we've seen Russell have, solid 40-point fantasy games, but he also has a couple of duds in there over the last 10, where he 22, 15, 11 the other night, where he doesn't play the fourth quarter because Byron Russell's head's in his ass. So, I mean, that's something that could happen. And you look at Isaiah Thomas, and the guy's going to get over 30 minutes, and he's just consistently over 30 fantasy points night in and night out.
Right. And that said, I mean, Russell is a good play tonight, obviously. He's playing the Kings, so we don't really have to talk too much about that. He is a good play. But I do like this whole range here. Moutier, 6,600. Ish Smith. Obviously, I'm talking DraftKings here, but I think all those guys are in play tonight, and some should eat off each other in terms of ownership percentage. But, yeah, Russell, Thomas, Moutier, I really like those three.
Yeah, how would you rank them tonight?
In terms of floor, Thomas is 1, Russell 2, Moutier 3. But in terms of upside, man, I like Moutier.
Yeah,
I think they're all kind of in the same range,
Yeah, no, I'm definitely in agreement there, and I like Moody's just priced a little bit better. Coming off a solid game against really a tough opponent. I like the 10 assist mark that he had. That's something that we haven't seen too often. And the way he's cut over turnovers, so I like him a lot at that price. I think it's another high scoring matchup, and Moody is just, I think he's got a little more upside than Ish Smith, and I think he's a similar play to Russell, but I just think he could be a little bit safer.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Moody is my top out of that one, and then not comparing him to Thomas are kind of equal for me.
Yeah.
So Looking at value here, and I think Derek Collison's probably the safest value on the board. Been seeing starters minutes over the last 10 games. He's averaging 33 minutes over the last 10, averaging 13, 2, and 5, about 26 fantasy points per game. And going to see some time at the 1 and the 2 against this team. And with the Lakers having a 110 Vegas total, that's safe exposure at a cheap price.
Yeah, he's been pretty consistent of late, and his price hasn't really gotten too inflated yet. So I still think he's in the value range. And obviously, you like that Kings Lakers matchup. So yeah, definitely in play.
Yeah, but there are kind of a lot of intriguing options down cheap, and kind of ones that fit in that GPP strategy. If you're kind of going cheaper and pairing him up with the top guy, and that's Donald Sloan. So up and down, but his up game came against Philly just 2 games ago for 41 DK points. He's been solid against Philly this season, so as many people have.
Brooklyn backcourt is kind of like Jesus take the wheel right now. You just don't really know. But yeah, no, definitely in play for tournaments. Stay away from cash. I mean, I think for cash you're really looking at that middle tier Toronto, But I mean, you mentioned before Isaiah Cannon.
Yeah.
He's definitely intriguing at his price and with matchup considered. Marcus Smart as well, 4,100. We don't really know how that production's going to get split up from Crowder, but he's definitely in play.
Yeah, I think you're going to see a bump in minutes for him. Yeah, Kanan has just been solid, 4,400. You're just looking with that Sixers minutes, or just because of the injuries with Grant out, Covington out. They're just dealing with a ton of injuries right now, and that's opened up some spots. And over 20 fantasy points in 3 of the last 4 games. His minutes were better against Detroit, and that was kind of surprising going up against a tougher defensive team for him to put up 22. But definitely an easier matchup if he gets time at the 2 against Brooklyn.
Right, and if he gets 25, you're happy. So, yeah, that's kind of how you're playing that.
Yeah. Another one to talk about, DJ Augustine. Minutes have been solid. You're looking at about 24, 25 minutes over the last 6 games or so, right around 24 fantasy points in that span. The one big upside game came when Denver decided to bench most of their starters, and he played over 30. But outside of that, I mean, 20, 25 minutes for about 20, 25 points seems about right for Augustine. I just don't think you need to stoop that low right now.
Right.
In cash, at least.
Right. Yeah, not in cash. But, I mean, again, tonight to differentiate yourself if you want to open things up at point guard, I don't think a lot of people are going to be doing that. So that might be an interesting way to move.
Yeah. Looking at shooting guard, looking at some injuries, none really to look at outside of Wayne Ellington, who's probable coming back tonight. That means the Markel Brown experience, if you've been chalking him up in the last 2 games. You've gotten yourself a nice combined 16 fantasy points.
Oh, my. Oh, my. I'll tell you what, that was a painful night of just great lineups being ruined by him. You can't ever – those nights never get old when one guy just slices through half your lineups. But
but you have there's only one person to blame, and that's yourself.
I am bad, and I should feel bad.
Looking at the top options tonight, and there's really 3 that are on my radar as far as the top plays, because they're all up top, and that's DeRozan, Middleton, Oladipo. But Oladipo's a safe play for me in all formats. I think he's going to be the chalkier of the 3, and that's just because of all the injuries and just how well he's been playing, as well as the matchup. DeRozan, Middleton. I like DeRozan's matchup a little bit more. Middleton's I'm not too fond of, but Middleton's been producing on elite levels.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and those are more contrarian plays. I think for very good reason. Oladipo's going to be the top shooting guard play tonight, and I love everything about that play. 40 to 45 fantasy point upside, but again, I think an interesting move would be sort of go Middleton or DeRozan here in lineup construction.
Yeah, I think that's a great contrarian way to go tonight because DeRozan has that upside, has a better matchup. Middleton's been in that 45 range for most of the last 10 games, and definitely could see him hitting that tonight. And the way he produces, the way he's been racking up assists of late, I mean, you're looking – it's like he saw Giannis get a couple triple doubles and he wanted to go out and do it himself. 8 assists, 7 assists, 5, 10, 7 rebounds over the last 3 games. 39, 41, 40 minutes. I mean, you like that production. You like those mid situation. Even though it's a tougher matchup, he's really come through in tougher matchups before. So I think GPP-wise, he still possesses similar upside.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree.
So, but Oladipo's my guy. Also looking cheaper. I'm about to get frustrated because this is where I'm a little irked tonight because Evan Fournier, Evan Turner, both shooting guards on DK, both small forwards on FanDuel. Basically, comparing small forward on FanDuel to DraftKings is awful. DK, there's no value at small forward. FanDuel, there's plenty of value for the target.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty bad. They got to get their stuff together.
I mean, Fournier's been playing the 3 for a while now, and Evan Turner, I guess you can go either way on him, but still, I think he's a small forward, so
yeah,
that's what he should be.
I mean, he does control the ball a bit, but that's not really that's not his position, you know?
Yeah, so I don't know, but either way, I mean, both I like those 2 a lot. Fournier's in a great spot tonight, and he's averaging 16, 3, and 3 over the last 10 games there, and Evan Turner as well. I mean, with Jay Crowder out, I mean, Turner has been solid. I think that's pretty much what his floor is going to be tonight. I think the upside just takes a little bit of a tick upwards with Crowder out.
There's a lot of hidden upside with this Celtics offense right now. It's kind of tough to know where it's going to be distributed, and who knows, it might be a different guy every night who sort of sees the good end of it. But yeah, there's going to be more upside than usual from their starters and sort of first guys off the bench.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm looking at a deep sleeper, not quite tonight, but Jonas Jerebko, going to see an increase in minutes with him out, especially against bigger teams like Indiana can run at times. So that's something to keep an eye on. And that's something that could also take away from, guys in the front end. Maybe Turner just stays at the same minutes and Jerebko gets the bump. Same with Smart. So it is a situation to watch and just know that can happen. But Turner's still a pretty safe play either way.
Definitely.
A guy that's not listed as anything tonight, and that's Kobe Bryant. Surprisingly, there's no Q next to his name for the first time in about 2-3 years. So.
Well, he wants to play the Kings.
Yeah, I mean maybe he can tee up Boogie or something and really end our nights. But I'm kind of looking at him as a contrarian play. If he can actually play 25 plus minutes, 30 minutes, his price is pretty cheap.
I'm not against that. He's probably he's got a pretty low floor, but I mean, yeah, in tournaments, if he hits 35 or 40 points, you're sitting pretty tonight.
Yeah, and against the Kings,
right? Definitely has that upside there.
Yeah, I'm kind of looking at him, and I'm kind of looking at him more so than other shooting guards for the Lakers, and that's Lou Williams and Clarkson, depending on what site you're on. Clarkson's a point guard on DK there, so but. I'm intrigued by Bryant, but I'm probably not gonna have a ton of exposure to him. But GPPs, I'll probably have a little bit.
He hasn't had a 20-shot game in a little bit, in a hot minute here, and I think this could be a night where he goes for 20 to 25 shots, just because easy matchup, and he's still Kobe.
Yeah, I mean, flash back the clock there. Let's take some shots. Let's take 20 plus and let's go off, because you know what, that could be huge tonight. But I'm going to take a look at him. But outside of that, it's Gary Harris for me. It's a great cash game and GPP play for me, just because he's still super cheap and the consistency's just been really solid, and he plays tons of minutes.
Right. Yeah. No. And the floor is really nice, and it's kind of raised to the point where you're looking at sort of 23 to 30. Low 30s every night, and that's reasonable upside. It's a solid range of outcomes for cash games.
Yeah, and Harris, I mean, the matchup, it's average. I mean, Orlando ranks 15th in defensive efficiency, but over the last 10 games, Orlando's led the most fantasy points per game to shooting guards. So Harris definitely on my radar as a safe play in all formats.
Mm-hmm.
Looking a little bit cheaper, shooting guard option. Bojan Bogdanovic, another value play tonight. I mean, just been solid when he's been in play. I mean, I think The game against the Raptors in Milwaukee, 25 and 27 fantasy points. Not great matchups for him, but still produced. And I think the floor is coming up. I think his consistency is coming up a little bit more than where it was, maybe a week or two ago.
Yeah, that's a fair price. Decent upside for that price for sure.
Yeah, I think he's the guy you want to take a shot at. His minutes are more consistent than Wayne Ellington, Larkin, those guys. So definitely in play. And if you want to get weird, Nick Stauskas.
Oh,
26 injuries have just deflated the Sixers. He's in play, coming off a 26-point game, 3,300. He's definitely just F it play. You know what? Let's be different.
And it's not like he's going against the tough teams. So he's a shooter. If he hits a couple threes and sort of does a few things, he's going to get the minutes. So pretty reasonable to think he could hit value tonight.
Yeah, I mean, with no Grant, no Covington out, it's basically Ish Smith, Hollis Thompson, Kanan, and Noel down there with Stauskas off the bench. I mean, that's what you're looking at.
I mean, he had 26 fantasy points last game, going 1 of 5 from 3. Yeah. So if he can get 2 or 3 threes and sort of do his 2 to 4 assists, I mean, that's already hitting value at his price. So
yeah, if he can knock a couple threes down with some peripheral stats, which we don't usually always expect out of shooting guards, but that'd be something to look at.
Right.
I like it a lot. Looking at small forward, and yes, there are some injuries. We're looking at Robert Covington, Jeremy Grant, but we kind of touched on who gets the minutes out of those, which we'll talk about Carl Landry in a little bit, but outside of that, it's going to be guys like Hollis Thompson and Kanan. After Thompson's game, I'm a little bit iffy on him, but I mean, I know the minutes are going to be there. I just don't see me using them tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not against you playing off that upside and trying to chase it, but I also don't think it's necessarily sustainable or something that is going to happen again,
Yeah. But I mean, looking at the top guys, I mean, it's Giannis. Great GPP play for me tonight just because that upside's still there. And the guy's just producing on elite levels, but if he gets you 30 or just 40 at 9,200, at 9,800 on FanDuel, it's not worth it.
It's so weird to see him at 9,200. I just got so used to him being a good value GPP play every single night, and now they finally raised his price up to where I actually have to think about it, which I guess is a good thing. Yeah. Still definitely in play with that upside. He's just crazy upside every night, and his floor has been in the 40s, so that's probably not going to be good enough for you at his price now, but yeah, that 70-point upside is a real possibility for him just with all the things he does. So in play, he's not actually my favorite small forward of the night, but yeah, he's always in play.
Yeah, I mean, if you're looking for a guy, he just logs heavy minutes, 38. I mean, all these Bucks starters do outside of Monroe. But coming off a 28, 14, 11 game, I mean, his stats defensively is what's solid. 4 steals, 2 blocks. He's just a big, lengthy guy who can get you that 5 to 6 steal plus block upside each night. And, I mean, I think I'm afraid to not get exposure in at least one GPP or 2 GPP lineups, but that price is really coming up.
Yeah.
But, I mean, just when Kawhi Leonard and Paul George are a little bit cheaper and just kind of produce a similar floor to him, maybe not quite the upside, but I do like them in cash games. I still like them in GPPs. I like both. Paul George a little bit more just because of the matchup.
Yeah, I like Paul George tonight, and the salary versus him and Giannis is actually large enough for me to make a difference. With value included, I like George more tonight. Obviously doesn't have that upside, but in terms of floor, I see them at a pretty similar light tonight.
Yeah. And here's kind of an interesting pivot, and it's still sticking within the Kings, and that's playing Rudy Gay.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, completely that when he was the chalk the other night against Orlando, it was pretty disappointing. 5 personal fouls, six turnovers. I mean, the guy, he didn't shoot well. I mean, when he was off back-to-back 37 fantasy point games. So dropping a dud, that's what Rudy Gay does. But if say you're not playing Rondo tonight, say you're still playing Cousins, still want to get some exposure on the other side. Rudy Gay, just 6,100. He's dominated the Lakers as many small forwards have. I'm looking at him in tournaments. I think he's a nice contrarian play.
And he's on an island in terms of salary. So definitely intriguing. You got to love the matchup. Got to like some of the nights where he's actually plays well. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously the dud factor. We've seen that the last 2 games, but the upside is still there. And again, if you want to get exposure to the Kings, that's a nice value way to do it.
Yeah. And this is where things get iffy because DraftKings tonight almost forces you to pay up a small forward.
Yeah.
As far as FanDuel, it doesn't. I mean, I'm looking at Bogdanovich, Fournier, Turner, Gay, George, and the top options, all on FanDuel at small forward. Looking at DK, it's Giannis, Kawhi, George, and Gay. That's it.
Turner, Turner on FanDuel makes a big difference. That is a really nice price point and sort of a way to get value from the position. But yeah, like you said on DraftKings,
it's tough.
Rough.
So moving on to power forward and not a lot of injuries. You're looking at yes, Ilyasova missed practice. Said he expects him to play. That would kind of simplify things a little bit if he missed just because of guys like Dedmon and Jason Smith. But situation that I'm not really going to touch tonight just because it's so iffy. And also with all those injuries, Carl Landry's really opened up 25 minutes in the last 2 games, 25 plus fantasy points in 3 of the last 4. His usage rate, 32.3, 28.5, and 26.7 in those 3 games that he's produced 25 or more fantasy points.
Yeah. Ding, ding, ding. Chuck. All the projection models are going to be loving Landry tonight, and for good reason. He's a great play, and he's so cheap that he's just a great play, you know?
Just a great play?
That's all I got. That's all you need to know about that. It's pretty straightforward with him.
Yeah, he's going to be a pretty chalky value, and I still think in tournaments and cash games. And Brooklyn ranks dead last in defensive efficiency against power forwards, so it's pretty clear why, especially if he's getting that usage again tonight. But site depending, DeMarcus Cousins, my favorite power forward, center, or whatever you want to call him. Against this Lakers team, I don't see any way for me fading Cousins tonight.
Right. And this is another big difference between FanDuel and DraftKings tonight. The roster construction with Boogie. I'm really trying to get Boogie in most of, if not all, my lineups, but FanDuel, it's much easier to sort of throw him in at center and fill in the value at small or power forward. So, yeah, it does change things tonight.
Yeah, I mean, just because there's a lot of power forward options that I like, and I mean, Aldridge, Thaddeus Young, Gordon, Noel, Randall, all guys I'm definitely looking at, and all at a cheaper range, but they're all the same power forward position as Boogie.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Thaddeus is my favorite power forward on this slate here. I just think going up against this forward team at home, I mean, you're looking at Philly, they've allowed the 3rd most fantasy points per game to power forwards this season. He's just been much more consistent than guys like Aaron Gordon over the last week and a half, 2 weeks or so, because Aaron Gordon was on that stretch, but we've seen some down games lately.
Right. Yeah, and his price is still very reasonable. And again, plus matchup. It sets up really nicely for him tonight.
Yeah, and I think Noel is a great GPP guy, still possesses that upside, a little bit more involved offensively now with Okafor out, and the whole 76ers offense just looks so much better with him off the floor.
Right, and I think the way I'm looking at it is I like Young, Gordon, and Randall a little more than Noel, but I think the ownership percentage could make a difference there, and I could see him being really low owned, and the contrarian sort of play for tournaments actually makes him a really nice sort of guy to look at there.
Yeah, and on DK, I mean, LaMarcus Aldridge just 400 more than Thaddeus is something to consider where he's $1,000 difference on FanDuel. Mm-hmm. I love Aldridge tonight. Clippers allowed the 5th most fantasy points over the last 10 games to power forwards, and Aldridge has just been a monster. I mean, you're looking at averaging 46 DK points, 25, 9, and 2 with 2 blocks and a steal over the last 4, and I just can see him. I mean, you're looking 3 times over the last 10 games that he's fallen under 20 points, real points.
Right. And again, I look at this Spurs-Clippers game, and when you first look at it for DFS, it's not that intriguing, especially compared to some of the other games. But I look at some of these higher end options, and I think there's definitely some upside here.
Yeah, which isn't something we usually say. I mean, they're two of the better defensive teams. Well, we know the Spurs are. Clippers can be at times. I like Aldridge a lot tonight. I think he's a great tournament play.
And Jordan and Paul have played well in the 2 games against them. So, I mean, if that game stays close and sort of they go back and forth, I could see 3 or 4 of the top options there, including Kawhi, sort of hitting value.
Yeah, and I'll talk about Jordan a little bit, but he is an intriguing play tonight. But looking at other power forward guys, Kenneth Faried, I mean, he's a guy who's definitely in play for GPPs because we've seen that upside. We also seen the lower minutes. And he doesn't play a ton of minutes. He rarely plays over 30. So nice matchup for him tonight. I'm looking at that upside for him in tournaments, but not touching it in cash for sure.
Right. Miles Turner has an interesting matchup, but we were talking, and it's probably just better to pay down for someone like Landry. It is a decent matchup, but he's just been so volatile and not that great lately that it's not really in play.
Yeah. And there's been one guy who's been getting minutes as another cheap power forward, and that's Patrick Patterson. And if Valanciunas sits tonight, we saw Patterson play 32 minutes last game against Chicago, 37 minutes against Miami. That's just mainly because Luis Scola just hasn't been playing well either. So we've seen Patterson slip into more of a bigger role, as if you need another value power forward. But if you're kind of just looking at some guys like that to be different with, Patterson is seeing bigger minutes than Landry and probably will again tonight.
And compared to most nights, those are relatively strong value plays. So I'd pretty confidently put them in for value, you know?
Yeah. Moving over to center, not a whole lot. We're looking at Vucevic there. He's out tonight, and that's the spot that I'm just not going to touch. I'm not going to touch with Dedmon. I'm not going to touch with Smith just because I don't know what's going to happen, and I don't need to pay down there.
No, I mean, if the production's going anywhere, it's probably like Aaron Gordon. He can have a big night, you know, or Oladipo has a big night. I don't see it being one of those sort of secondary guys.
Behind him. Yeah, I'm with you. Oladipo, 22.8 usage rate this season, 25.5 without Vuce this year. So it's still just – it makes more Fournier and Oladipo the more appealing plays tonight.
Right.
But, Brook Lopez, he's definitely intriguing on DK because Cousins is a power forward. The points have been there. The rebounding and everything else have not.
And that's a little bit – I mean, that's kind of how his career has gone a little bit, but it's been more extreme lately. Love him. I won't say like him on DraftKings, but FanDuel, it's just there's no real reason to play him over Cousins, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, I think if anything, I mean, he's more of a play on DK, and hopefully, I mean, he can get some boards, and he should be getting boards because Philly ranks 30th in rebounding. They do struggle against centers, so you expect the scoring to be there. I think pairing him up alongside Cousins is a nice move tonight. FanDuel, I just can't see myself paying down from Cousins to him at all.
Nope. DeAndre Jordan, again, that's more of a contrarian play. His price is pretty solid right now, and he's done really well in the last 2 times he's played the Spurs, averaging 42 fantasy points per game against them this year. So pretty intriguing play.
Yeah, I mean, he's averaged 17 rebounds in that span. He's never going to score a ton of points, but block steals. If they deploy the Hackett Jordan thing, as we've seen Popovich do, I mean, he's had 22 free throws in 2 games against the Spurs. I know most of them came in that first game.
Right.
That happens, and he can go at least 50% from the field, which is asking a lot from him. That gets him a couple extra G points.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if he makes 40% of them, he's right around 10. So there you go.
Looking at some GPP guys, Sullinger is a power forward on FanDuel, but center, I like him a lot here on DK at 6,000. Been playing really well, coming off a monster game against Houston, and the minutes have been up and down, but his fantasy points per minute have not been.
Right, and I think just the way roster construction is going tonight, you're sort of landing in that 65 to 6,000 left when you get to center. So Sullinger and Jokic are both in play for me tonight. And again, that hidden upside for Boston, we don't know where a lot of that Jay Crowder production is going to go, and Sullinger is one of the main candidates for me.
Yep, I like him a lot. I like him a lot in tournaments, and just because center, I have my boogie goggles on, so I'm just like completely zoned into boogie, and that's about it on FanDuel. DK you can work with a little more, and looking at some other options, it's basically Monroe, Sullinger, Jokic in that range that you can go with. Alongside Lopez and Jordan, I don't have any problem going there.
Right.
And one intriguing play for, I kind of don't mind him in cash just because Duncan's can get right around that 25 mark. Even in GPPs, 4,400, 4,500.
Not bad.
Yeah,
Duncan.
A great matchup for him.
Yeah, no, I do like it. He has had a pretty big game recently. I think realistically we're looking at 25 to 28 fantasy points. That's kind of where he's been landing lately, but he does have that upside even in limited time. So, yeah, I do like that play.
Yeah, I don't see him getting over 30 minutes tonight, but I mean, 28 seems to be about where he's maxed out at, and I like that a lot. And I definitely could see, he definitely has 35 fantasy point upside. We've seen it before in 25 to 28 minutes. So, and this is a matchup where he can do it, especially at home in a big game like this.
Right.
So, anyone else? Who are you looking at? Who's your highest score non-boogie wise?
Non-boogie. Again, I really like Paul George tonight, but yeah, it's either Paul George or Chris Paul, but I do like Paul George, especially with value included, so I'd go with Paul George.
All right, highest. All right, I'm gonna take Lowry. I'm gonna take a rebound encore performance with Lowry there.
Dig.
Yeah. That's going to wrap things up with the minutes to win it. Check out dailyfantasycafe.com for all our great tools and content.